the best is yet to come. Brad, why do you think the bears are back in the market?
Well, why the bears back in the market? Look, first of all, thank you for having us. I think this is an incredible event. It's my first time to join this event, but hopefully look back to being next year as well. And obviously good to see you both. Look, I think crypto has gone through cycles. And when you have risk on, people are excited. They are, now you have kind of a risk off moment. There's uncertainty. I personally will echo some of the things Richard said. There are so many macro factors that are continuing to provide tailwinds for this industry that I think as we go into 2026, I don't remember being this optimistic in the last handful of years where you do have, as Richard said, regulatory clarity in the largest economy in the world. And I think people underprice this. 22% of global GDP is the United States. And this is a market that has been really openly hostile to crypto for 4 or 5 years, or maybe longer. And now you have that has changed significantly pretty quickly, but the institutions are still catching up with that to some degree. You saw Franklin Templeton on stage here, you saw BlackRock on stage. Just this week, I think Vanguard has now opened up, Vanguard historically has said, we won't touch crypto. And now they've had a massive sea change. That's just one of many things that are creating those tailwinds, and so I'm super optimistic about the year ahead. The last thing I'll say on this, which I think we'll also probably all agree about on this, is we are also seeing real-world applications where it's not just about the speculation. You're finding easier to use interfaces so that crypto isn't just about the speculation, it's about solving real-world problems. And to sustain that long-term optimism, that long-term bull market, I think you're going to see more and more of that.
What's your take on this too? Do you think the ETF floor was overhyped?
Definitely no. Look, obviously what you were describing is all data correct, but I think you got to zoom out a little bit further and realize that this ETFs didn't exist because of the regulatory problems in the United States. They didn't exist, and in the last 2 or 3 weeks, over $700 million have flown into XRP ETFs, which is just it's pent-up demand from institutional investors, from investors who want access because they don't want to custody themselves, what have you. But look, again, if you zoom out to the macro level, the total ETF market, only 1 or 2% of the total ETF market is crypto. I will bet anybody here that a year from now, that will be more than 1 or 2%. There's going to continue to be inflows, and yes, you can take a snapshot of time and say, okay, there's a billion left Bitcoin ETFs or whatever the data you cited a moment ago. But if you zoom out a little bit further and say, okay, over 2026, do we really think crypto ETFs are only going to be 1 or 2% of the total ETF market? No chance. And so that, again, it's one of those macro tailwinds where Ripple sits in a position where we see, particularly from our Ripple Prime, the prime brokerage business, we see a lot of interesting activity where institutions that have been on the sidelines, maybe because of regulatory clarity, maybe because of risk aversion, for whatever reasons they've been on the sidelines, they're getting involved. And they're starting small, and they're going to walk, then they're going to crawl, then they're going to walk, then they're going to run. And I think it's going to create a lot of tailwind.
So this moment in the market hasn't necessarily spooked institutional capital. That's what you're saying?
Definitely not.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit more about the institutional adoption here and what you're seeing in terms of real-world payments as well on the stablecoin side?
Well, I mean, the stablecoin point you're making particularly, I think you are absolutely right that as people kind of went risk off, they stayed on stablecoins, which is indicative of, as Richard's describing, the utility, the 24/7 nature of a stablecoin, but it's also trust, where maybe years ago they might have said, I want to get into a fiat that I trust even more, but people are recognizing that stablecoins can be stable and easier to manage. But look, this region in particular leaned into regulatory clarity early. Ripple launched a stablecoin just over a year ago. It's just passed about $1 billion market cap. But now it's also been approved in, whitelisted in Abu Dhabi as well as in Dubai and the DIFC. It's good collateral on various platforms from a lending point of view. And I think that the tailwinds just on solving real problems and good collateral that's easy to move and is more flexible and can be moved multiple times a day even, that wasn't possible before. And I think we're going to see a lot of unlocks that, when Ripple thinks about this, and it's an honor to be up here with these two, Like, we want Solana to do great. We want Binance to do great because I think we're still bringing people into the ecosystem. Stablecoins are one way of doing that. There are going to be lots of other applications, some that Ripple builds, some that are built in the Solana ecosystem, and some that Binance builds.
Speaking of the big guy, President Trump in the US, let's flip it over and talk about what's happening stateside because, Brad, you've also said in the past that the US regulatory environment is, and I quote here, hostile. So do you think that's changed for the better? And what are you seeing right now in terms of the regulatory roadmap in the United States that will ultimately impact your business as well?
Look, I think one of the things that Binance has done incredibly well, the numbers that Richard's talking about, 300 million people, they're bringing people into crypto. We all want, there's an echo chamber that we all experience of people in crypto. But the amazing thing about the passionate pioneers that are here in this room is they've been in. We just want that audience to grow. And I think what you're seeing happen in the United States with regulatory clarity, Richard earlier referenced the Genius Act. The Genius Act is regulatory clarity for stablecoins. And you're already seeing more institutional interest in stablecoin payments. Ripple purchased a company called G Treasury recently, which has visibility into over $10 trillion of payments from their corporate customers. And the number of those customers who are already, the acquisition closed Monday. The number of those customers that are already approaching us interested in leveraging stablecoins for the flexibility, for better yield, as a trusted resource, because of that clarity, people are leaning in. We don't yet have obviously Ripple went through a long lawsuit with the US government, and XRP received regulatory clarity from the federal courts. We have been championing, and I know Team Solana has been championing regulatory clarity for crypto broadly in what is generally called the Clarity Act in the United States. There's still forward momentum on that. I don't think it's going to happen this year, which the President Trump has kind of championed. But I think sometime in the first half of next year, we'll see passage of legislation, which will continue to unlock and create more tailwinds for the whole industry. I'll go out on the limb and I'll say Bitcoin 180,000 December 23rd or December 31st, 2026.
All right, where's the prediction market around that now?
Yeah.
It'll be live in 2 seconds.